The wind howled like a wounded beast across the desolate stretch of Wyoming prairie, whipping snow into a frenzy that blurred the line between earth and sky. Elias Thorne, a man carved from the same unyielding granite as the Rockies, stood at the edge of Laramie's lone bus depot, his wool coat flapping like a tattered flag of surrender. At 58, Elias was a rancher who spoke more to his cattle than to people, his words hoarded like the last grains in a drought-stricken silo. His wife, Clara, had been taken by cancer 3 winters back, leaving him with a herd of longhorns and a silence that echoed louder than thunder. Tonight he was in town for feed supplies, the bus his reluctant chariot back to the ranch under a sky that promised burial by dawn. He stamped his boots against the icy platform, breath fogging the air like ghosts of regrets unspoken. The depot was a skeleton of faded red paint and splintered benches, abandoned by all but the desperate. Elias pulled his collar higher, cursing the storm under his breath when a shadow detached from the swirling white. A small figure no taller than his belt buckle, huddled against the depot wall. She was a girl, maybe 10 or 11, her threadbare jacket no match for the gale. Her dark hair, matted with frost, framed a face pale as new milk, eyes wide with the terror of one who'd learned the world could bite. She edged closer, movements furtive as a fox in a henhouse until she stood inches from him. Elias tensed, his calloused hands balling into fists, not from fear but from the unfamiliar ache of witnessing fragility. Then in a voice so soft it nearly drowned in the wind, she whispered, "Sir, can I slip under your coat?" Elias froze. The words hung between them, fragile as a spider's thread in the blizzard. No one had asked him for shelter since Clara's last breath, when she'd murmured for him to hold her close against the chill of her fading. This girl's plea cracked something in him, a fault line running straight to the hollow of his chest. He stared down, seeing not a stranger but the ghost of his daughter, Lily, lost to a fever at 5, her tiny hand slipping from his in the ranch house fever dreams. The girl shivered violently, teeth chattering like loose pebbles in a tin can. Without a word, Elias unbuttoned his coat, the heavy wool parting like reluctant curtains. She darted in, pressing against his side, her body a bundle of bones and unspoken pleas. He wrapped the coat around them both, the warmth of her small form seeping into his ribs like sunlight through storm clouds. They stood like that for what felt an eternity, the bus delayed by the whiteout. Elias said nothing at first. Words were his enemies, clumsy tools that broke more than they built. But the girl's breathing steadied, her head resting against his flannel shirt, and curiosity pried his lips apart. "What's a sprout like you doing out here alone?" His voice rumbled low, gravel over river stones. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers clutched the edge of his coat as if anchoring to a lifeline. "Runnin'," she murmured, the word carrying the weight of miles and heartaches. From Pa. He drinks firewater till the devil dances in his eyes, then he swings. Ma's gone, took to the rails last summer, said she couldn't breathe no more. Left me with him in that trailer park outside Cheyenne. Tonight he came home meaner than a cornered rattler. I grabbed my pack and ran till my legs gave out. Elias's jaw tightened, the cold forgotten in the heat of her confession. He'd seen men like her father, broken by the bottle, lashing out at the world that had lashed them first. His own Pa had been one, fists flying like hailstones until Elias, at 16, had stood tall and taken the farm by force of will alone. But this girl, with her bird-like frame and eyes holding storms of their own, stirred a protectiveness he'd buried deep under layers of grief. "Name's Elias," he said gruffly, as if trading names could build a bridge over the abyss. "And you?" "Josie," she whispered, peeking up at him. Her gaze snagged on the silver locket peeking from his collar, a gift from Clara etched with Lily's initials. "That for someone special?" He nodded, throat constricting. "My girl lost her young. World's a cruel place sometimes, Josie. Takes what it wants and leaves the rest to freeze." She nestled closer, the shared warmth forging an unlikely pact. As the wind screamed, she began to talk, not in bursts, but in a steady trickle like a spring thaw, of schoolyard taunts for her patched clothes, of neighbors who turned blind eyes to the bruises blooming like wild roses on her arms, of dreams stitched into the lining of her pack, a sketchbook filled with charcoal drawings of horses galloping free across golden plains. Elias listened, his silence no longer a wall but a hearth, drawing her stories into the light. For the first time in years he felt seen, not as the stoic rancher who fixed fences and faced blizzards alone, but as a man with scars that mirrored hers. The bus's distant rumble cut through the gale, headlights piercing the veil like hesitant stars. But as the hulking vehicle groaned to a halt, Josie stiffened, her small hand fisting in his shirt. "I can't go back," she said, voice cracking. "They'll find me. Send me home to him." Elias's mind raced, a stampede of what-ifs thundering through the quiet he'd cultivated like a sacred right. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to hand her to the driver, let the authorities sort it. He was no hero, just a man with empty acres and a heart half frozen. Yet as he looked down, Josie's eyes pleaded not for pity, but for the impossible. Belief that kindness could outrun cruelty. An unexpected turn seized him then. A memory, sharp as barbed wire, of the night Lily died. He'd been out mending a windmill, too stubborn to heed Clara's call. And by the time he burst through the door, his daughter's fevered whimpers had stilled. The regret had calcified him, turning tenderness to stone. But here in this girl's trembling grip was a second chance, fragile and unforeseen. What if he'd frozen that night too? What if silence had won? "No," he said, the word a vow forged in the storm. "You ain't going back. Not tonight. Not ever, if I got breath left." He guided her toward his battered pickup, parked defiantly against the depot wall, the bus idling forgotten behind them. The engine coughed to life, wipers batting away the snow like insistent doubts. As they rattled onto the highway, Josie's questions tumbled out. About the ranch, the horses, the stars that wheeled above like God's own lanterns. Elias answered haltingly at first, then with a warmth that surprised him, painting pictures of sunrises bleeding pink over sagebrush seas, of foals stumbling into the world on wobbly legs. By the time they crested the final hill, the ranch house loomed, a sturdy sentinel of timber and stone, its windows glowing amber against the night. Elias led her inside, the door creaking like an old friend's welcome. The kitchen smelled of pine and faint coffee, a far cry from the trailer's stale despair. He brewed cocoa from a tin Clara had stocked years ago, the steam curling like whispered secrets. Josie sipped it slowly, her sketchbook spilling open on the table to reveal a drawing of a man and a girl under a vast coat, silhouetted against a blizzard's fury. "You drew that?" Elias asked, voice thick. "On the bus ride here in my head," she said shyly. "You looked like a mountain, steady." He sat across from her, the weight of decision settling like fresh snow. Dawn would bring choices, calls to social services, lawyers versed in the tangled vines of custody. But for now, in this suspended hour, he chose to believe in more than survival. "Josie," he said, reaching across to cover her hand with his weathered one. "This place, it's been quiet too long, empty, but maybe it's waiting for someone to fill it with stories." Withdrawals and laughter. "If you'll have it, there's a room upstairs. Beds made, quilts warm, and a mare out back needs a name. Someone small enough to whisper it soft." Tears welled in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of a dawning wonder. She slid from the chair, wrapping her arms around his waist in a hug that mended fractures he'd forgotten naming. Elias held her, the silence between them blooming into something sacred, a promise etched not in ink, but in the quiet acts that redefine a life. In the weeks that followed, the ranch transformed. Josie named the mare Whisper, and together they mucked stalls and chased sunsets, her laughter echoing through the canyons like birdsong after rain. Elias found his voice again, reading her tales of frontier heroes at bedtime, his gruff timbre softening into melody. The authorities came as they must, weaving red tape into a fragile safety net. But Elias fought with the ferocity of a father reborn, trading his solitude for courtrooms and character witnesses, neighbors who'd glimpsed the change in his step, the light reclaiming his eyes. One crisp autumn eve, as leaves turned the hills to fire, Josie presented him with a new drawing, the two of them on horseback, coat billowing like wings, the prairie stretching endless before them. "For keepin' me," she said, pressing it into his hands. Elias traced the lines, his heart swelling with the truth he'd unearthed in that frozen moment. Kindness isn't a grand gesture, but a quiet opening, a coat shared in the storm, a hand extended across the chasm of alone. It doesn't erase the scars, but it stitches them into stories worth telling. And in a world quick to harden its edges, such selflessness becomes the truest rebellion, reminding us that humanity's power lies not in enduring,